She was forced to serve cake to her husband's mistress, humiliated daily in her own home, but what nobody knew was that she had secretly signed away his entire billion-dollar fortune. When the truth exploded, his world crumbled in seconds. This is a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happened to me, and how I fought back in ways I never thought possible. I'm going to take you back 12 years, to a day when I thought I had everything. A mansion by the coast, a man who promised me the world, and a life that looked perfect from the outside. The problem was, it was all built on lies. I met him at a charity gala. He was the kind of man who commanded every room he entered, confident, charming, and impossibly wealthy. He owned a shipping empire that stretched across 3 continents. Within 6 months, he asked me to marry him. Within a year, I was wearing his ring and living in a sprawling coastal mansion that had more rooms than I could count. I remember walking through those halls thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. I told myself that I'd won the lottery. I told myself that this was my happily ever after. For the first few years, it was real, or at least I believed it was real. He would bring me flowers without reason. He'd take me on spontaneous trips to places I'd only dreamed about. He introduced me to his business associates, made me feel like I was part of his empire, like we were building something together. He'd ask my opinion on deals, involve me in conversations about expansion and strategy. I felt seen. I felt valued. I felt like his partner in every sense of the word. But somewhere around year 7, something shifted. It started small. A text message he quickly deleted when I walked into the room, staying late at the office more often. His phone suddenly locked with a code I didn't have. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that successful men work long hours. I told myself that trust was the foundation of a marriage, and I needed to stop questioning him. So I did. I pushed down the doubt, the whispers of my intuition, and I chose to believe him when he said everything was fine. Then, one evening, I found her perfume on his jacket. It wasn't a subtle scent. It was expensive, distinctive, and it wasn't mine. I held that jacket in my hands for what felt like hours, my heart breaking piece by piece. I smelled it again and again, like I was trying to understand how my entire world had shifted without me even noticing. When he came home that night, I didn't say anything. I just watched him, trying to see the man I married in his face. I couldn't find him anymore. The confrontation came 3 days later. He didn't deny it. He didn't even apologize. Instead, he told me that this was just how things were, that men of his stature had needs, that I should be grateful he was keeping me comfortable, keeping me safe, keeping me in the lifestyle I'd grown accustomed to. He said it like he was doing me a favor by cheating on me, and then he did something I'll never forget. He told me that if I wanted to stay married, I'd have to accept it. Otherwise, I could leave, but if I left, I'd leave with nothing. I was trapped, and he made sure I knew it. Within weeks, he brought her into our home. Not secretly, not with any shame. He brought her openly, introduced her to the staff, and made it clear that she was welcome. Then came the moment that broke something inside me. He looked at me in front of everyone and said, "Darling, why don't you serve our guest some champagne? You do it so beautifully." That's when I became invisible. That's when I stopped being his wife and started being his servant. Every day became a ritual of humiliation. He'd ask me to prepare meals for her. I'd spend hours in the kitchen, cooking dishes that had once been our special moments, meals we'd shared laughing, talking about our dreams. Now I was cooking them for a woman who sat at my dining table, mocking me with her presence. He made me introduce her as family. He made me arrange flowers in her room. He made me iron her clothes. And every single day I felt a piece of my dignity slip away. The worst part was that nobody intervened. The staff would watch with pity in their eyes, but nobody said anything. The friends we'd known for years would come to dinner parties and witness me serving drinks while he flirted openly, and they'd just look down at their plates. I became a spectacle in my own home, and the world watched in uncomfortable silence. I remember one evening in particular. There was a dinner party and I'd spent the entire day preparing, cleaning, cooking, arranging everything perfectly. I made a dessert that had taken 3 hours. It was her favorite. He'd specifically requested it. When I brought it to the table and placed it in front of her, she looked at it, wrinkled her nose, and without a word, she pushed it onto the floor. It shattered. The cake splattered across the marble tiles, and everyone at the table froze. She looked up at me and smiled. "I'm not in the mood for that," she said. "Make something else." I stood there, staring at the broken cake, and something inside me snapped. Not in anger, in clarity. I realized in that moment that I had given this man power over my entire existence, and I wasn't going to do it anymore. That night, after everyone left, I went into his study while he was sleeping. I'd been in that room 1,000 times, but I'd never really looked at it. Now I opened every drawer, every cabinet, and what I found made my blood run cold. Documents, contracts, financial statements showing an empire worth over $2 billion. I saw properties I didn't know existed. I saw investment portfolios that made my head spin, and then I found the prenup that I apparently signed 12 years ago. Except I didn't sign it. I know my own signature, and that wasn't it. It was forged. Perfectly forged, but forged nonetheless. And according to this document, if we divorced, I would walk away with almost nothing. A monthly stipend, a car, and the clothes on my back. Everything else, the mansion, the businesses, the investments, all of it, would be his. I sat on the floor of his study, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to leave him. Not yet. Not until I had a plan. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. I met with her in a coffee shop far from home, and I brought copies of everything. She reviewed the documents with a careful eye, and then she looked at me and said something that changed everything. "This prenup is invalid," she told me. "It was signed under false pretenses, and more than that, I think we can argue that you contributed significantly to this empire." She explained the law to me. Apparently, a spousal contribution clause existed in cases where one partner had demonstrably helped build the marital assets. Early in our marriage, he'd consulted me on deals. I'd helped him think through strategies. I'd been there through the growth phases of his business. It was documented in emails, in meeting notes. He'd even publicly credited me in interviews. If we could prove my involvement, we could argue for a much larger settlement, maybe even split the assets. But here's the thing, we needed evidence, we needed proof, and we needed it gathered carefully, discreetly, without tipping him off. So I became an actress. For 3 months I played the role of the broken woman who'd accepted her fate. I smiled when appropriate. I served when demanded. I pretended to be broken. But in secret, I was gathering evidence. I recorded conversations where he bragged about deals we'd worked on together. I photographed documents. I compiled emails. I took notes. I was building a fortress of proof, brick by brick, with each passing day. And then something unexpected happened that I never could have orchestrated myself. The mistress came to me one afternoon, crying. At first, I thought it was a trap, some kind of cruel game, but her tears were real. She'd overheard a phone conversation. She'd learned that my husband had another mistress, in another city, in another apartment, and he'd been making the same promises to her, the same lies, the same "you're the only one" declarations that he'd made to this woman. She was devastated, and she was furious. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone on his side turned against him. The mistress, in her anger, gave me something invaluable. She confirmed details of his financial setup that proved he had hidden accounts. She told me about properties he'd bought in her name that he'd kept secret. She became, unwittingly, the perfect witness. We never spoke about it directly. We never made any agreement. But suddenly, my attorney had corroborating evidence of financial deception. The day we filed for divorce, I felt my entire body exhale. It was time. It was finally time. He was served with papers while at the office. When he came home that evening, he was furious. He screamed that I was ungrateful, that I was betraying him, that I'd never survive without him. He told me I'd never get a penny. He said his lawyers would bury me. He said I'd regret this for the rest of my life. But I just watched him, calm and steady, knowing what he didn't know yet. I had the evidence. We had the witnesses. We had his lies on tape. The court proceedings lasted 6 months. His lawyers fought viciously. They attacked my character, questioned my contributions, claimed I was a gold digger who'd married him for money. But then the judge listened to the recordings. The judge read through the emails. The judge heard testimony from the mistress about his hidden finances, and the judge made his ruling. The prenup was invalid due to fraud. My contributions to the marital assets were substantial and documented. I was awarded $1.2 billion, roughly 60% of his liquid assets, several properties, and ownership stakes in his major companies. His empire, the thing he'd used to control me, was now divided. Half of it belonged to me. When the gavel came down, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. But the twist wasn't over. Because what happened next was pure karma. Once the financial freeze was lifted and the transfer began, everything collapsed for him. His business partners, the ones who'd been willing to work with a man of his stature, started walking away. They didn't want to be associated with the scandal. He'd been publicly humiliated, accused of financial fraud, exposed for his infidelities. The shipping contracts he'd counted on started disappearing. His reputation, which had taken decades to build, evaporated in months. And the mistress? She sued him for breach of promise? Apparently, he'd promised her marriage, promised her he'd leave me. She had emails. She had texts. She had proof. The settlement she received came out of what remained of his fortune. His lawyers told him he was looking at bankruptcy within a year. I watched from a distance as the man who'd forced me to serve cake to his lover now begged his remaining associates for help. I heard that he'd tried to hide assets, moved money illegally, and faced federal investigation for fraud. The golden boy who'd once commanded every room he entered was now toxic. Nobody wanted to be near him. I could have felt satisfaction. I could have felt vindicated. But mostly I felt sad. Sad that a man with so much had thrown it all away for the thrill of cruelty. I took my settlement and I did something that surprised even me. I started a foundation. I opened a legal clinic that offers free divorce counseling to women in situations like mine. I use my resources to help women understand their rights, to help them fight back against financial abuse and marital exploitation. I've helped over 200 women secure their own settlements, their own independence, their own freedom. I kept the mansion, but I transformed it. It's no longer a symbol of control. It's now a retreat center for women rebuilding their lives. Every room that once housed humiliation now holds hope. Every space where I once served now serves a greater purpose. The thing about karma is that it doesn't require your help. It doesn't need you to plot or plan. Sometimes all you have to do is stop accepting the lie. Sometimes all you have to do is stand up and say no, and the universe handles the rest. I learned that my value wasn't dependent on what he thought of me. My worth wasn't tied to his love or his cruelty. I had always been enough. I just needed to believe it. So if you're watching this and you're in a situation like mine, I want you to know something. You have options. You have power. You have rights. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Don't let shame keep you silent. Don't let fear keep you trapped. Because here's what I learned. The person who leaves is never the loser. The person who speaks up is never weak. And the person who chooses themselves is always, always the victor. I didn't just win a court case. I won my life back. And that, more than any amount of money, is the real victory. Thank you for listening to my story. But before you go, I need to ask you something. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, then please, like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me what you think. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel. Because there are more stories like this. Stories of people who fought back. Stories of justice served. Stories of karma in action. Your support means everything. It means more women will see that they're not alone. It means more people will understand that silence is the real enemy. So subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next story. This is The Servant's Billion. This is my story. And this is just the beginning.